Hello and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodity space. My name is Jesse Day. Before we dive in, standard disclaimer, nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And today's episode is sponsored by ARC Silver Gold Osmium. They offer personal service and often the lowest price, period, with no minimum purchase for silver, gold, platinum, or osmium. Here's just some of the great things people had to say about ARC SGO and owner Ian Everard on this channel. Have bought from ARC, good source and price. I cannot say enough good about Ian and his company. He is the most honest individual I could find in order to buy precious metals. If you are looking to buy PMs, I recommend Ian at ARC. He is a straight shooter. I purchased a lot of silver from ARC. So visit their website at arcsgo.com. Contact Ian Everard at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com for all of your precious metals needs, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And today's guest is an economist that has been studying currency life cycles since 1987 and the founder and CEO of Zang Enterprises, where she educates and empowers individuals to attain financial freedom and independence utilizing the principles of sound money and community. It's Lynette Zang. Great to have you on the show.
Oh, I'm very happy to be back here, Jesse. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I want to get started, as I often do, with a bit of a broad overview, in this case, of the gold and silver sector. So you can take this anywhere you'd like. Give us your thoughts on the main themes and trends you're currently watching in the precious metal space that you think investors should be paying attention to.
Well, actually, I think the most important thing that I'm seeing, aside from the technical breakouts and all of that, is the broadening base of buyer that we're seeing on a global basis, but it's going to a younger generation, which really gives me a tremendous amount of hope. You know, we see that with Walmart and Costco and Amazon now selling gold and silver to the general public and selling out very quickly. Here in the US, we are also seeing a similar kind of thing in South Korea with the youth and definitely in China as well. So that is giving me a tremendous amount of hope, even including the smartest guys in the room on money, which are the central bankers, buying more gold than they ever have historically. First quarter 2024, central bankers globally have bought it's the strongest start of the year ever. And we saw that especially since 2010 when they went net positive. But frankly, central bankers have been buying more gold than they've been selling since 2005. So a couple of years, 3 years before the financial crisis, they saw it coming. What do they see coming now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that central bank buying is such a strong catalyst for the gold market. And it amazes me when people say that they don't see the value in gold. When you just look, the central bank buying alone is such a major part of it. But I want to touch on something you said there about China. China's gold revolution. You posted a video on your YouTube channel about Chinese retail buying of gold. Walk us through what you're seeing there.
Well, I'm seeing a very broad base of buying, and what I find really interesting, because the Chinese public was allowed to buy gold again in 2006, but it was primarily done through the banking system where they would also hold the gold. So what I'm seeing now is them buying a lot more like jewelry, which is one of the reasons why I wear, jewelry on air so much, but through jewelry, through these little beads. So they're breaking it down into affordable levels for the masses. And this is really huge because if they're buying it in those forms, they're actually holding it themselves. They're not holding it in the banking system, right? So I think that's huge because China, as we know, is the most controlled public. And I'm also witnessing some quiet revolutions there. For example, aside from the gold buying, it's the one child rule. Well, oops, they just realized they do not have enough new babies being born to support their economy, their aging economy. And so they tried to shift. And it's not like people necessarily are standing up and waving banners. They're simply saying, no, we can't afford it. We're not going to do it. So they created that problem. But also seeing the Chinese public stand up to the powers that be when they were putting these huge lockdown, even greater restrictions from COVID, the lockdowns, and also what's happening in the real estate markets, etc. For a while, inflating the system and building ghost cities and building all of that looked great. But now their public is starting to see something different. And when they rose up, the political machine actually backed down. That gives me so much hope because this is a global issue. We have to come together globally.
Absolutely. I do want to get some further thoughts on China and the BRICS nations from you because I hear different thoughts. I talk to some people like Simon Hunt who thinks we're going to enter a new era where Russia and China actually leading the way, are going to kind of become the next global superpowers on the geopolitical stage. I wonder what your thoughts are there because, as you mentioned, there's a lot of problems going on in China. But there again, we hear different opinions and different ideas. Louis Gove, who operates in China, he has a very different opinion than the mainstream consensus that China's on the economy is on its way to collapse. There's all these issues. He's saying that China's actually very much stronger under the hood than people realize. So I'm wondering what you think about the current, U.S. hegemony potentially coming to an end, the BRICS nations potentially rising up to challenge it, and how gold might play a role in that future. What are your thoughts?
Well, what we're looking, I do think that we see the power shifting from the West to the East, so away from the US. And the US dollar has less and less position. In fact, the IMF, I haven't even had a chance to read the blog. I just kind of glanced through. But the IMF just came out with a blog post on the dollar's loss of even more positioning. I do think that we're seeing this shift. I think that while China is and Russia are likely to lead the way because of how much gold they're putting into and they're buying into their systems to retain that power, when I'm looking at the BRICS, what I'm really seeing is a new global financial infrastructure being built around the digital community, right? And so right now, the US has controlled the SWIFT system, which is the global infrastructure. But I see the East being a lot more aggressive toward the cryptocurrencies, so to speak, and the CBDCs than the US is. And once that plumbing is fully in place, I think, and SWIFT is trying to stay relevant. I mean, that's what I'm watching. They're really trying to stay relevant as they become less and less relevant. And I don't know how easy would it be to turn on the faucets of one system and turn off the faucets of the other for those that are in power. For the public, it's no matter what they do, we're looking at huge challenges, which is why it is so important to be fully prepared with food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation. Community has become my personal biggest focus, and shelter. So while you've got to have a foundation of sound money, you cannot live without food and water. All of these products, all of these commodities have been turned into a trading product. Everything has been, but we need to come together in local community to ensure the individual's security in all of those 8 mantra areas. And we have to come together to support each other. On a global basis, let's create this quiet revolution and convert this junk into this sound money And therefore, if enough of us do it out there, and we don't need everybody to do it, although that would be great and it'd be smart, but we just need a very vocal contingency on a global basis to buy enough physical gold and silver and hold it in their possession. Because if you don't hold it, you don't own it. It really is that simple. And have a seat at the table in this new financial system. Because the old one died in 2008 and it was just put on money printing life support to buy time to get the next iteration in place. Is it in place yet? Not so sure. I'm not so sure that they're finished yet. So I think they will attempt to, I say this tongue in cheek, but kind of put it off until they do have it in place. But truthfully, I don't think anybody knows how fully or not it is the new digital infrastructure, the new CBDC structure is in place. I mean, the US was one of the leaders. They were in a test pattern on it. And then we had Silicon Valley Bank, the regional banking crisis, and we had FTX come in. And so the US kind of pulled back the speed on which they were developing that. And now we're seeing, through the Senate or wherever, bills that are being passed kind of against it, but I'm not sure that I really believe it, to be honest with you. I'm not sure that I really buy it because a lot of times it's just for show. It's all about perception management and helping you think that it's not. When we have the Fed Now accounts in place, just waiting for the next crisis. Because what they say in the last crisis, boy, it sure would be a whole lot easier if we could just push a button and inject a whole bunch of money right into the system without having to mail checks or do this or do that. So, I don't think we really know the truth. I think the truth gets revealed later. However, I'm prepared and I'm getting prepared.
Yeah, very well said. I want to dive deeper into the CBDC topic because I had Tom Luongo on not too long ago, and he thinks that the wars being waged are required as cover to reset the banking system and issue a CBDC. He thinks ultimately in the end it won't be a success, but that they're going to try it, and that perhaps this escalation of conflict, the fact that they don't want to sit down at the table with Russia and actually hash something out, they just want to escalate. Now, members of the EU are talking about sending troops into Ukraine. France, Germany is talking about this. It seems kind of insane to be antagonizing a nuclear power like this. Do you have the same thoughts that perhaps these wars are being used as a distraction?
An absolute a bazillion, yes, because there are certain patterns that occur every single time a currency regime shifts. And it is used as cover. Here, look over here so you don't see what we're doing. And war is one of them. And what I'd also like to say about wars is that there are many that know a whole lot more than I do about cyberspace that absolutely believe that World War III has already begun in cyberspace. But the public can't see that. So therefore, that's not enough of a distraction. We have to, and we see financial wars. I mean, we definitely cut Russia out of the SWIFT system, et cetera. So we don't really need boots on the ground's war in order to win whatever it is that they're going to throw out as a reason. And I'm not convinced it's them or it's us. I'm really more convinced that on a global basis, what we've been seeing is deglobalization in manufacturing, but a real hard push toward globalization in the financial system, where the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and keep in mind, their members are all treasury secretaries and central bank chiefs of almost every country in the world, 189 members, and there are, or 189 countries, there's 196 countries in the world. So almost everybody. And we're seeing them rapidly develop this umbrella, this universal currency, which the SDR always made sense to me because it is a basket of currencies and there are no restrictions on how many currencies they can put in this basket. So it makes every bit of sense in the world for the IMF, those technocrats, to be controlling everybody and have a universal currency and then have and then have it easily translate into a local currency so that people do not understand that anything has changed when in reality everything had changed. And I was there in 1971. And I remember Nixon coming out and saying, if you buy American, inflation is not going to impact you. Nothing is changing. This is temporary. And here we are all those years later. It's pretty long temporary. And certainly look at the purchasing power of the dollar, right? The difference between inflation and hyperinflation is simply the speed of that inflation. Either way, officially, we have virtually no purchasing power left in the currency. They've got to attack principle. That's what negative rate experiment was about. And we'll be back to that and then some.
Do you think that this shift we're seeing, maybe on a smaller scale, but starting to pick up steam with governments being more, as the mainstream media labels them, far right, where the rise of Javier Milei, Bukele in El Salvador, and we recently saw right wing parties sweep the election in the EU. Do you think this is a sign that people are maybe catching on more than it would appear? And does this make any difference at all? Because I tend to just not trust politicians in general. And I also feel like the more so-called right-leaning politicians who are talking about being pro-freedom and anti-immigration and all these things are just saying that to get elected because they see the public sentiment shifting a certain way. Maybe I'm wrong. Bukele does seem pretty amazing, but it's so hard to tell with these people. Is this going to make a difference at all in these plans to launch a global CBDC to take away more freedoms? Could this narrative be shifting in your view? What are your thoughts?
Well, that is another thing that happens. There's the rise of protests. And so what do you have to do to calm those protests is you have to install somebody that seems to be on their side, but there are very hard choices that have to be made because we have to get rid of this unpayable mountain of compounding interest rate debt. So I don't really think that it matters so much who gets installed because we have to go into a hyperinflationary depression in order to burn off all that debt. So, but the rise in the population and populism that we're seeing actually was pretty close to this level, if not a little bit above it, in 2019. And then it was quashed with what happened with the cerveza disease in 2020. And now it's rebuilding again because it's just like the suppressed price of gold and silver, right? They can keep pushing it down by creating as much false gold and silver that does not nor ever will exist as they want to until it benefits them. And then they do those overnight revaluations and you see gold moving back toward its fundamental value. So I'm kind of with you in that I kind of am and I'm kind of not. I'm definitely in it with you. I think that people that go into politics initially may have every single good intention. But the system itself, the beast itself is so corrupt that I don't know how effective they would be or how quickly it would take to turn them. On the other side of this, what I'm seeing, especially in supporting sound money and with what Biden recently did with changing the classification of marijuana on a federal level because of the state pressure, I'm feeling like we all need to become, and me included in this, a lot more active in the states promoting gold and silver as legal tender once again, because that may give us that opportunity at the federal level, because that's all been flip-flopped. I mean, in the Constitution, it was the individual that was the head. And then the states are supposed to support the rights of the individual. And then the federal government's supposed to support the states supporting the rights of the individual. But that's all been flip-flopped. So I'd like to see it flip-flop back, right? That's what a gold standard actually does, is it gives the public the ability to have a level of control over the politicians. Because back in the day, you could walk into the bank with this $20 bill and walk out, this would have been a $20 gold certificate, and walk out with this, and then that reduced the amount of gold that the government held, which means it reduced the level of debt and new money that could be created into the system. So the public had control if they didn't like what the politicians were doing. They had to take that away from us. I'm saying give it back. Even if there is a component of gold in the currency, it must be convertible. The public must have the ability to say, I want my gold. Give it back. Even if I'm not saying you're going to have 100% backing. You don't need to have 100% backing, but you do need to have a convertible, or it ain't over yet. Look at Zimbabwe and their great experiment with gold, because all confidence in their currency, in the those that are in power, gone.
Yeah, 1971 was yesterday in the span of human history, and yet the fiat currency regime and those behind it have been so successful in convincing the public that gold is not anything special. It's like a collectible item. It blows my mind that today I could talk to the vast majority of people I know, not through this show, obviously, but people I meet in the street or my friends who aren't so interested in finance. And they would be like, why would you want gold? Like, well, what am I going to do with it? It goes up a little bit. Why go over here and invest in Nvidia and watch this thing, keep ripping? It's pretty interesting considering that gold is money and yet it's viewed as some alternative investment class. That alone is insane, but I'm wondering what you think it's going to take to wake more people up to the fact that gold is money, because most people aren't tracking the fact that central banks are accumulating gold at a record pace, that Putin has recently announced that the BRICS are looking to develop an alternative system of payments outside of the US dollar. All of these different catalysts that we've been talking about, they're not seeing these things. So is it going to take they say pain is the greatest teacher. Is that what it's going to take to wake most people up?
Unfortunately, and the answer is yes, which goes back to why community is so important. Because I've certainly had people say to me, well, if they don't get it, that's just too bad for them. That is not how I feel about it. I feel an even larger obligation, because what we're really trying to do, you and I, is give people a paradigm shift, enable them to have a paradigm shift. And in order to do that, they have to admit that what they have been told their entire lives is a big fat lie. And most people don't want to do it. It's more la, 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 because if they can make it happen really slowly, like they have 2% inflation, you still lose a lot of your purchasing power over time, but you don't notice it. And therefore, you do not change your behavior, your spending behavior, your asking for a raise behavior. That is what our central bankers call price stability. Not that that gallon of milk stays the same, stays stable. It's you, the consumer, that do not change your ways if they can make it happen slowly enough. If it speeds up like we've been experiencing, people do notice. And that goes back to what I said about people buying gold and silver through, Amazon and Walmart and Costco. So that they are waking up. And that's what gives me so much hope. But the vast majority, It's all about distraction. And I will tell you, because I've read all of these documents, when they were creating this system back in the early 1900s, right? What they actually said was, well, inflation will make people have to work more to maintain a certain standard of living. And if they have to work more to do that, they will have less time to pay attention to what we're doing. So inflation, when they created the fiat money system, this most current iteration that we're living through, and I'm talking about going back to 1913, they knew that people marry the legal money of the state. Well, the dollar, it's the same dollar, but you know what? I did something. I was traveling, so I got a whole bunch of cash. Oh, what did I do with it? Oh, here it is. Okay. We'll send you close-ups of these, but I noticed when I was just sort of counting out my cash that the bills look different, right? So I was looking at it. This one is dated let's see, 1990. Okay, and it looks like this and back, and we'll send you pictures of this. This one is dated 2006, right? So it looks kind of similar, but a little different. But hey, the dollar's still there. This is 2009. Now it's got the striping in it, right? But look at how similar these two look, right? Not a whole lot of changes. I'm going to pull a bill, and I have done this before, 1970 and 1972, right? They look almost identical, just like if we come out with a digital dollar. If they keep, and they say this in their documents, it's not me, this is not my opinion, this is them stating that if we keep it as much as normal as possible, then we can make this transition. We know how to do that, right? And part of that transition is allowing the new system to win. So people see the prices going up, like Bitcoin and the advent of the cryptocurrencies, et cetera. Last time I checked, so I'm sure it's higher now, but the last time I checked, we had 16% adoption in this country. That's kind of enough adoption for people to feel comfortable with cryptocurrencies. And you can see on Wall Street, they're certainly, they've created this new asset class, and they're trading and they're creating all sorts of products from it. But I believe that is a Trojan horse. Some of them will survive. Maybe the CBDCs will have their day. I mean, I think they're pushing them out, whether they've been adopted or not, because they can give you something for free. You'll go out and spend it. The question is, will you put new money into it? And that has not been, it's been successful in China, but it hasn't been successful in other places. So the jury is still out for me on that. But most definitely, and Zimbabwe is a very interesting case, because presumably they now have gold as part of their new paper currency, the ZIG. And they're still having trouble with adoption because it's not convertible. So can you guarantee to me that the gold is actually still there? Unless I can go out and pull it out of the system, doesn't mean anything. They can say anything that they want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually spoke with G. Edward Griffin, the author of The Creature from Jekyll Island, a while back. And he said we actually need to be cautious about governments claiming to go back on a gold standard, because the politicians will say whatever they need to say, they'll introduce whatever they need to introduce. But ultimately, once they introduce this currency, unless it is 100% redeemable, as you mentioned, they can completely essentially lie to you and tweak with the system themselves. So that is a fascinating thought. I do want to hear your opinion on asset allocation for your average person when it comes to gold and silver. I had Andrew Slay on the show recently. He has a view that many would consider extreme, in that he says no stocks, get out of stocks, sell them all, no bonds, a minimal cash, put the maximum amount of your net worth in physical gold and silver within your possession as possible. From my point of view, there's some issues with that in terms of investors who are seeking alpha, who are looking for a return. I personally invest in the gold and silver mining space as well to get more upside there. But he sees a danger in the equities and bonds as well, that if there was a collapse of fiat, then you're going to lose all of those assets too. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have the same view? Is it a little more moderate? And how do you think your average person should be looking at their allocation to gold and silver?
Let me first say that everybody needs to do what they're comfortable doing. You need to understand that I have been groomed for this moment in time, and I have been in the financial space on some level since I was 4 years old. Okay. So I personally am extraordinarily comfortable with physical gold and silver, but I was a banker and I was a stockbroker. So I understand that language and I understand what it's doing. And I also know how these asset classes move and work inside of hyperinflation. So a great example is Venezuela in 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16 had the best performing stock market in the world as their currency was hyperinflating to zero. I have somewhere in this mess $100 trillion Zimbabwe note. Well, that's a 500 million bolivar. But the point is you can't do anything with it. So we get blinded. This was another thing that the creators of the system knew, is that people don't understand inflation. Unfortunately, those that are driving the bus don't understand it either. But we get blinded by numbers, right? And so think about this. 1971, the average wage was $10,920. And that equated out to, don't hold me to any of these numbers, so obviously I don't have it in front of me, something like 285 ounces of gold, right? Today, the average wage is something like 63,000 and change. And so most people would say, well, I'd rather have 63,000 than 10,000, of course. Except that one wage earner could support a family of four on that 10,000. If you did not get one raise, but were just paid in terms of gold, that today equates out to something like 650,000, which definitely kept pace with inflation, right? But the average wage, so stocks going up is one way to hide the value of the currency going down, because most people open their 401k statements or their IRA statements or whatever, and as long as they look okay, they think everything must be okay, because there was a time when the stock market was a barometer of the economy. Today, it is not a barometer of the economy at all. It is a trading barometer, because everything has been turned into a trading instrument. So personally, and I definitely consider myself a technician, but I do not consider myself a trader. Short-term trading is just way too stressful for me. Honestly, I mean, I had all those licenses and could do it. That's just not who I am. I am a long-term strategist, and I have studied currency life cycles since 1987. I don't know too many other people. I actually don't personally know anybody else that's done that, although I'm sure there are. And what you see are these repeatable patterns that happen 100% of the time in government debt-based systems, right? So I am 100% clear on where we are in this trend cycle, and I am all in. All of my wealth, all of the fiat that I get, I do have a certain level of cash because I'm running a business. I have to pay salaries. I have to pay bills. Like, most people, they have to pay their bills. But that's the amount of cash that I don't have a problem if it goes away. I have this to counter that, because it's gold against which, the primary currency metal against which they do those overnight revaluations. And the other thing is I know how to tell what the true value of any asset or any instrument is. That's its fundamental value. And you base that, there's a little bit of nuance in there because you have to understand what the most important function is for its creator, not for you or for me. But why was this instrument, or why was this asset, why did gold become the primary currency metal and have been for thousands of years? It isn't just in one area, it's used across the entire global economy. So it doesn't need to have a government say, this is money, like this piece of debt-based paper is. So personally, food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. That's where all my wealth goes. I'm all in gold and silver. Silver is for my day-to-day barterability kind of things. I need a tank of gas. I need strawberries, although I have an urban farm to take care of the food and the water issue, and I have a bug out location that's completely off grid should it get really nasty down here. And if it doesn't, that's great because I love going up there. That's where I recharge my batteries and actually where I feel the safest. But yeah, I'm all in gold and silver. The average person, I can't really speak for them, but what I can speak to is that we have a sound money strategy that is based upon your goals. That's what we get. That's where we go first and foremost. And then we look at your circumstance and your systems. And so if you do want to be more diversified and stay in some fiat money products, that's okay. Be properly diversified and have some real money outside of the system. So if this goes away, even if it goes to the moon, 10 trillion times zero is zero, this will recoup it. So that's how I feel about it. I think it's a personal thing, just based on where we are in this currency's life cycle. You know, why do I want this? Because it's my tool of barter, and this is what I have to use at the moment. But this enables me to buy any currency anywhere in the world like that and have the same level of purchasing power or greater. And when they do that reset, it'll seem like your purchasing power is growing because, like in Venezuela, it went up 3,500%. The first overnight reset that they did, because the currency went down 97%. So what does that look like in stocks, right? Did the stocks hold their value? No. It's easier to rob you with intangible assets. It's harder to rob you if you hold it and you own it.
Now, there are those out there, and I get these comments all the time on the channel, that are tired of hearing about an impending collapse of the system. And they point out that experts in the gold and silver space have been calling for the fall of the fiat currency regime for a very long time. Obviously, these things are extraordinarily difficult to time, if not impossible. All fiat goes to zero eventually, but this collapse, which will eventually happen, could this be decades into the future as opposed to months or years?
No flipping way can it be decades. They used up and all of it died in 2008. I don't care that they started this kind of garbage to just promote all of those fiat money assets. And, you know, if for those that were around them, what did they keep talking about? Reflation, right? They want these things to happen slowly. They want distance. They say it. Read their documents. They say it all the time. This is not my opinion. This is a fact. They want distance between their policies and how that is and when that is presented to the public so that there is no clear line that can be drawn back to them. And yes, if you look at the purchasing power chart, if you said to me, and anybody that watches my work knows I like my charts and my graphs, right? Because I think they tell the story more fully. But if you said to me, you get one chart to use forever, which one would that be? For me, it would be the purchasing power chart. because from the Federal Reserve itself, go to the FRED, F-R-E-D, Federal Reserve Education Department, and up in that search bar, all you have to do is put purchasing power of the consumer dollar, and you will get this graph that will show you that officially we have already lost more than 97% of the purchasing power of the currency. Well, and it's interesting because they're doing it since 1913. So it kind of looks like, this big long drop off, and then it's just kind of sort of like this. Well, that's because we're already down to the 3 cents. And if you shorten that up, you can see how precipitously that drop has really been in a shorter term basis. That's reflective of the inflation, the real inflation. Because the way they talk about it, it makes it sound like the prices are going to come down. No, they're just going to go up more slowly. That's all they're wanting to do. Have it go slowly enough that you don't notice it, or that you don't put a whole lot of stock and value into it. So can they postpone it longer? Look, I didn't see QE, and a lot of people didn't see QE. I knew about the reset because of a 2009, which I just even checked last night, but it's gone. And I wish I had captured it. But 2009, Christine Lagarde, that was the head of the ECB at that time, came out on a Bloomberg interview. And in this 20-minute interview, she used the term reset easily 29 times. I sat there gobsmacked. I was like, okay, that's what we're talking about, a complete reset of the entire financial system. And that's when I started talking about the reset. I knew the system died. Now it's got to be reset, right? The system's based on debt. The debt is not repayable. All right, who cares about that? But tell me if we've got, and don't hold me to this number because obviously it's not in front of me, but if we're sitting and looking at a $1.3 trillion deficit, can you please tell me why we are servicing 35 trillion in debts just in this level? Do you know what that difference is? Compounding interest. Because the money that they have coming in isn't paying. Think about your credit card is not paying all of the interest. Forget the principal. It's not paying all the interest. So whatever interest they don't pay now goes into the principal, and you're paying interest on interest. If that's your credit card, are you ever getting out of debt? No. And the system is based upon constantly compounding that debt. And so if you get to a point, and look at 2008, when the government injected, or the central bank rather, injected $800 billion into the system, everybody went up in arms. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Well, what they did with the quantitative easing made what they did in 2008 look like chump change. And then what they just did in 2020, and it has less and less effect. So that's why we have to reset, and that's why they can't postpone it for decades. I can't tell you if they're going to come up with some other thing that nobody can see coming. Maybe they will, but quite honestly, the assumption is that they always want to kick the can down the road. Do you really think that I know more than the central bankers know? Because I'd say I don't. Right? I'm not privy to any of their meetings, any of their discussions. I only have access to what everybody else has access to. It's just that I'm the nerd that will go in and read them and then attempt to translate them. And why do you think that global central bankers are buying the most gold ever in history? Because they know that the end is near, and they want to stay in power and have their freedom and have their choices. Same reason why you and I should be positioning into as much gold as we can. It's not for that bump up in fiat money. It's not a trade. This is not really, they've trained us to be traders, but this is not really short term. Sure, you can trade. But this is a currency life cycle issue. And they need to keep you in the system to finish transferring the wealth that they've been doing since this was handed over in 71 to the central banks to control the rate and speed of inflation. We're at the end. That's why, how many articles have you read where they're saying, we've never seen this before? Oh, this is unique. Oh, why isn't this working anymore? Blah, blah, blah. It's because we're at the end. That's why. It's not rocket science. It's just a repetition of history.
Well, Lynette, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for coming on the show. For those who want to learn more, could you tell us about Zang Enterprises and where people can find that?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, our website is LynetteZang.com. We love one-on-one communications on whatever kind of level you want to. You can also call us on, I love our phone number, 833-GLDZANG. So I will translate that to 833-345-9264, but GLDZANG is pretty darn easy to remember. You can find us on YouTube and Twitter at the Lynette Zang, and on Instagram and Facebook at Lynette Zang. We are all about building community locally and globally, and we are definitely a huge support to a sound money system, both locally and globally.
Great. Well, I'll put all of that in the description below as well so people can check it out. Thank you once again, Lynette, for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge with the audience.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, this episode is sponsored by ARC Silver Gold Osmium. For all your precious metals needs, head to arcsgo.com and contact owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.